Hello dear teachers. Today's video's title was actually not in my top 10 list. It is about the relation between nutrition and education. And I know, usually nutrition is parents' responsibility. So why are we talking about that in teachers' discussion? Actually, what I want to concentrate on is I know that if whether you are a parent or just a teacher, in both cases, this video will be helpful. Because if you're a parent, you will know what to concentrate on, what to avoid. And if you are just a teacher, you will know how to deal with the problems of behavior and results dropping in your classroom. One of the reasons is the food that we consume. What started it all is an experimental study I read about that occurred in 2011. The subject of this study were 72 girls, and they were picked randomly. They live in the same environment. There were no major differences between them, and there are more than one level. They studied the same school also. They were studied for 2 months. After 2 months, or actually during those 2 months, the first group they were divided into two groups. The first group were only exposed to healthy food. The other group was exposed to unhealthy food, or let's call it fast food. At the end of those 2 months, there were notable difference in or notable effect of food on the results. The difference in the results were uncanny, were touched, and that's why we are talking about this topic today. When we talk about unhealthy food, we are talking about saturated fats. We are talking about French fries, sugary desserts, chicken nuggets, cheeseburger. This kind of food that we drool for all the time, but we need to be careful with, because when we talk about this kind of food, and I want to concentrate on glucose in specific, glucose comes from carbohydrates. And glucose is vital for energy, for the body energy. If the glucose was very high, this will lead to the opposite. This will lead to energy drops. When glucose is ingested to the body releases insulin to process the food. And actually, if the food was healthy, and glucose will slightly increase, which will lead to energize the body. But if the food was unhealthy, the level of glucose will be very high, and this will lead to energy drop. What my study will be included is two part, or my study will be divided into two main titles. The subtitles under the title of the ways that nutrition influence the students' learning potentials. The first part is how can food, or how to improve the brain function according to the food. We agree that there is an effect, there is a relation between the food that we eat and the brain function. We know that, and I will give examples. For example, iron deficiencies lead to deficiencies in dopamine transmission, and we talked about dopamine when we talked about the teenager brain. If we have dopamine transmission deficiencies, this will lead to negatively affects cognition. Other example, deficiencies in vitamin E, in vitamin B, in iodine, in zinc will lead to deficiencies, or will inhibit the cognitive abilities and concentration. Otherwise, amino acids supplementation, amino acids and carbohydrate supplementation will actually improve perception, intuition, and reasoning. All those processes that are very important for our students. So we can conclude that the food that we expose our kids to affects their abilities to learn. We all agree on that. What kind of food can I feed my children in order to improve their brain abilities? We call them brain food, or energizing brain food. The first kind of food that we need to concentrate on, and we need to focus on in our meals, is green vegetables. Green vegetables are rich with vitamin K, with folates, with carotene, beta carotene, with lutein. All of those are very important to slow cognitive decline, which means will prevent Alzheimer, which means will prevent forgetting things, will energize our memory. Second kind of food is fatty flesh. Fatty flesh, which are talking about healthy fatty flesh, not saturated fats. Healthy fatty flesh, like the ones that we find in the fish, in tuna, in red meat. This is filled with omega-3 and protein and fatty acids, and this all will affect our energy. It will energize the body and will affect the energy of our students. Berries, the third kind of food. Berries are known with energizing the brain, are known with improving memory. And the last but not least, which is well known, nuts, especially walnuts. Walnuts are very rich with protein and with healthy fats. This will energize the body, all the body, not just the brain, and will increase the memory. If you are over 18, also coffee is very important for your students. If your students are less than 18 years old, I prefer to avoid coffee for a while till they become over 18. All of this food affects the brain of the students and will help them to process better with education. The second title, the subtitle, and the influence of food on the students' learning potentials is the effect of behavior. Food affects behavior. Why do I talk about that? Once I was reading a book called Gifted Education, and one sentence was very important. I think it affected me the most. The professor was searching for gifted students to teach them, and the sentence that she came up with is really touching. She said, "We were learning for extraordinary students, but we found extraordinary environments." So what affects learning actually is not just the way or what you teach or the way you teach or the student's brain itself. Also, the environment that the student learn in is very effective. And one of the environments is the classroom environment, which is the behavior of the students. Food affects the students' behavior, so you must check what they eat. Avoid, ask parents to avoid ditch limit sugar first, not just because energy or because energy, etc. It is actually very very important to limit sugar for their brain. Second thing, ditch artificial food coloring. It's very dangerous. It doesn't worth the effort or the risk we are putting our kids through. Why do I talk about all that? We say that it affects the students' results. We said it affects the environment in the classroom. I found that lots of parents give their kids breakfast money to eat breakfast in the first recess. Students must eat before going into the classroom. Once I had a student who asked me to eat in the first session, and I know if actually they are over 14 years old, their digestive system is very fast, they consume food very quickly, and the metabolism in their bodies is very high, in its high levels, so they need to eat. If a student in this age asks you to eat, let them eat, because they will not concentrate with anything else. Let them drink lots of water, because water is very essential for their brains and their body. Make sure that your students eat healthy food before the first session, because it is very important to go to the first session fed, not thinking about food in the first recess. That's all for today. I hope this was helpful for you all. Be aware to share your knowledge about the effect of food on your students' results. Thank you so much, and see you soon.